We have just concluded executive session, and we are now back into general session. So we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. So let's all rise. And I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, just as a way of announcement, I'll just say that our chair tonight is not able to make the meeting tonight, so I'll be sitting in as chair. Okay, we'll move on to approval of minutes for October 19th, 2015. Do I have a motion?
Move that the Board of Selectmen approve the open session minutes of October 19th.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Minutes approved. Okay. We'll move on to communications and announcements. First on the list is a update of our FY16 financial status from our Finance Director, Lynn Savage. Lynn, would you like to? Wherever you're comfortable. You can sit right there if you want.
How many years did it take you to go first?
Are we?
15 and a half. Hi. Okay, well, I'm here to report the first quarter financial reports. And as you looked at your packet, you'll notice that the financial reports are a little different because they're from the new system. I'm working on fine-tuning them to be more in line with what you were used to getting. But for the time being, I needed to get some numbers to you guys to show to you that the conversion went well. It was very successful. We're up and running with the system, and we're moving forward with some, the implementation of payroll starting January 1st. So I'm happy to be able to say that, and it was a lot of work and had, great help from all my staff and everybody else. So I mean, we managed to have another successful conversion. So moving on to the financials, the property tax revenue collections for the first quarter are at about 24.3%, which is right in line with last year at this same time. So that's good. Motor vehicle excise collections are at 14.7%, which is up 8% from last year, which is about $148,000. Now, what that is any commitments for last fiscal year, as well as what stragglers that have come in for this fiscal year, but dated for 2015. They were either misappropriated to another community, and the state figures it all out and then resends the bills to us, and then we get the collections. So that is up, and we still haven't had the actual commitment for 2016. That won't happen until February, so that's when the largest part of our revenue collections will start coming in. Meals tax collections, again, it's at 28.5%, which is in line. That's been a very successful. It's gone up slightly every year. We are in line. It's going strong. So we didn't see any decline in that whatsoever. We finally got pretty much two full years of full collection. So we have a good trend going forward to start doing any further projections. Ambulance service collections are at 24.9% collected, which is in line with last year. This does not take the new rates into effect. The new rates will start coming into collections in the second quarter of 16. So we will see an uptick in the collections, most likely on the ambulance, because the new rates will just were implemented. Building inspections, those are at 96.5%. We're pretty much collected what we budgeted, and that is due in part to the Berry Street project. As you all know, that's the big project out on, is it 114? That generated $464,000 of inspection fees in the first quarter. That's not expected to be next year or any additional. Backing that out of the collections, we are right in line with the collections from last year. So we typically like to keep the bigger items out so that we make sure we're following on track and going to meet budget. If we didn't have that, we would still be in line to meet budget that was projected.
Kind of an outlier.
Yep, it's an anomaly that, comes every once in a while. Every few years we have bigger projects that would generate some sort of large fee like that. And then we have interest income. That is running a little low compared to last year. but we'll just keep an eye on that. If we, don't meet budget on that, we do have certainly other revenue line items that are exceeding budget. But it's the interest, can't do anything about it. They're not changing interest rates in any way, so it's just running stagnant at what it is, so. And the budget, we didn't increase the budget. We kept it pretty level from the year before, so I'm not anticipating that being an issue. It should pick back up. Overall, on the local receipts, if I back out the motor vehicle excise, which is the largest piece of the local receipts, we're at 31.48% of the budget, which is great. We're in line. So there are no other, any issues with revenue line items that I see at this point. If any do, of course, bring it to your attention. The expenditures are at 32.5% of the target at this point in the year, which is typical. It's trending. We are encouraging everybody to encumber their funds so that it's set aside for specific purposes, so that would generate a higher percentage because it looks as if the funds are spent, which is a good process because the new system we're using now, all purchases are made with POs. There are no more just go to the store, pick up something, buy it, and then send over an invoice. Everything has to go through PO approval process, and it's...
Regardless of the amount.
Yep, which is, it's easy, it's more efficient, plus we can track the budgets better and know where we're standing. Moving on to the enterprise funds, water and sewer revenue, they're no issues as I see right now. The revenue collections for water at 29.9% with expenditures at 26.5%, and sewer revenue collections are at 32.6% with expenditures at 56.1%. Expenditures look a little high because we've encumbered all the funds for the sewer assessment, and things like that, which are bigger items. Sewer assessment is $1.4 million, so encumbering that is, of course, going to generate a higher expenditure percentage, but it's not necessarily all spent. So just to give you an idea on that. Stevens Estate collections are at 56.2%, up almost 20% from last year. They are running strong. Their bookings are great. Their expenditures are only at 37.5%, which is up a little bit, but more business generates more expenditures, which is going to increase it. Just a little overview of the Stevens Estate. Last year, they ended very strong. They increased their fund balance or their retained earnings by $132,000. So they ended the year with, $237,000 retained earnings, which is good considering the history of the Stevens Estate over the few years when they were really struggling. So they are picking back up, which is due to in part by they're doing some work up there, they're renovating it, they're pulling, they're doing some marketing. They're looking at it different, they're pulling in new business, they're getting a good reputation, so it's generating a lot more. So, and that's all I have. I don't know if anybody has any questions after looking at the reports or.
Seems like all good news.
Yeah.
Is there anything in here, Lynn, that really concerns you at all? Is there anything that
Not right now.
No?
Not that I can see. Like I say, I run these reports for myself on a monthly basis. I come and report it to you on a quarterly. If anything was to pop out of the woodwork on me, on the expenditure side or anything like that, I definitely would bring it to your attention. I don't, everything's running pretty smoothly. The only thing, we get into winter, then we'll be back here and we'll discuss where we're at that point. But let's knock on wood, we're not going to have any snow. Or if we do, very little. Very little.
Where are you moving to?
I know. Where am I coming from, right?
Yeah.
What little land?
Okay, any other questions from the board?
No, good.
Thank you, Lynn.
Just a note on something Lynn said, we did receive federal reimbursement on snow. Have we received the reimbursement?
We've received the confirmation that they've approved the PW, which is the project worksheets. So they're in their process of finalizing all the numbers, and then they'll be sending us a check. So
how much do we anticipate?
it's a little close to about 250, 260,000.
So a little less than a quarter
Yeah.
of what we overran.
Right.
A
Yep.
little less than a quarter of what we overran, right?
It's
About an eighth of what we spent, right?
what we spent. Yes. So that's a good thing, and we don't hope to have another year like that. Not soon, anyway.
Right.
Thank you.
So it might be a good time to identify that Lynn and Jim Mealy, with the support of Jen Price, has been great. The school committees have heard this as well. We're adding to the shared services piece centralized payroll. The next step, which began several years ago in finding ways to take primarily back office operations and consolidate those between town government and school department. And payroll will be the next position that does that. So the payroll coordinator, the payroll position for the town, will service all employees, school and municipal, just as we do with purchasing and facilities and information technology. So it's a great additional step that shows the partnership that we've had for quite a while.
And that's in conjunction with going live with the new general ledger system on payroll on January 1st. Yep.
That's great.
Yep. Good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Right, next, under communications and announcements, we have the Community Choice Aggregation Program. Mr. Manager.
So, Mr. Chairman, several months ago, I believe it may have been actually this time last year, I had someone come and speak to the board about the prospect of aggregating the municipal load of all of the homeowners in town to go out to bid collectively to have an alternative source of electric supply for the town. It's becoming more common in surrounding communities. There was support by the board at the time. The idea would be that it needs town meeting authorization, by the way. I think we talked about that about a year ago, that with town meeting approval, we could go out to bid on behalf of our residents and find an alternative energy supplier, electricity supplier. We choose, after that bid comes back, of whether or not we want to proceed. Obviously, we'd only proceed if the supply costs were less than what the utility charges, National Grid. National Grid will tell you that they pass through supply costs. There's not a profit added to it. So from their perspective, the loss of supply on a bill doesn't mean anything to them. They think residents should do what they should do to benefit themselves. This provides an opportunity to aggregate all of the electricity load for homeowners in town so that we could go out to bid and receive a favorable rate, which we in turn would pass along to the individual homeowner ratepayer. So from a ratepayer's perspective, a homeowner's perspective, they'd get the same bill. So somewhere in that bill, instead of saying National Grid for supply, it would say whatever the alternative provider was, and the town would only proceed in that case if the supply costs were less than what National Grid would charge. So there's not a risk from a homeowner's perspective. You regularly, every semi-annual or annually, go back out to bid again, and if the bid doesn't come back favorably, you default to the National Grid rate. No loss to anybody in town, anybody from that perspective.
If these people gave a lower rate than what they now pay now, it would be good for the whole town.
It'd be good for anybody who pays for electricity. Yep. So, sorry, go ahead.
You can continue, Andrew.
That's
I wanted to see how would this impact customers who, for instance, there's a company, Viridian, out there. I know that there are several people in town that work for them. I mean, they utilize solar energy sources, and that helped lock in our rate. If we utilized them, that would have locked in our rate with National Grid. I don't know more details about it. I can get more. I just know that there are several folks, Linda Perry, for instance, jumps to mind, that works and is really active with that organization.
Solar in place of electricity?
It's Viridian.
They sign off on a certain rate. I think my rate is 1049.
So this is a similar idea, except what the town is allowed to do under state statute is aggregate the entire load of everyone who lives in the community, creating buying power so that when you go out to bid, the companies that bid give you a more favorable rate than even if you can get typically than what you would get from a individual supplier who may even be cheaper than National Grid. In that particular case, that becomes the default supplier for all the residents. If a resident is unhappy with that, they remove themselves, and they can go to an alternative, or they can go back to National Grid.
So there's an individual opt-out clause.
Absolutely.
You don't have to.
Yep, you don't have to. So 98% of the time, this bid rate for supply will be cheaper than the market because you're aggregating, it's not just you and your neighbor, it's all of us and all of our supply, and the supply companies for electricity would prefer having the opportunity to bid on all of your business. So it, more often than not, is beneficial. And again, when we get the bids back, if those bids are equal to or higher than the supply offered by National Grid, then we reject the bids. Again, transparent to the homeowner, because from their perspective, they're just getting a bill, and there's a line item in a bill that talks about supply. and that supply would then default to National Grid. So if we go out to bid and it's not favorable, it defaults to National Grid. The bill looks the same. Homeowner doesn't see any difference. If the bid is favorable, say a penny, 2 cents, 3 cents difference on the supply side, which can be substantial, then that becomes the default supplier for the period of time until we go out to bid next.
Does National Grid ever renegotiate?
No.
To be competitive?
No. Again, what National Grid is strictly passed through on their supply. So the supply rate that they charge their customers is the supply rate. And that's why it's not one of these cases where National Grid will say, geez, you're taking away our profits, we're going to increase costs over here. National Grid, in fact, I met with them this week, and we've heard this from them in the past anyway, they affirmed what they always affirm. We have no issue with individual residents going to find an alternative supplier, because from their perspective, they add no profit margin to the supply side. It'd be different on distribution, transmission, transition. There's 6 different components to the bill. But of the supply piece, it's simply passed through. So if you use a company like this or an alternative company, and some people do that today, that is of no issue to them.
Bill, if you already have an alternative supplier, this doesn't affect you. Stay with the alternative supplier, because they just did this in Burlington. So you're only converted if you're from National Grid. If you already have company ABC and you get your supply from company ABC, this doesn't affect you.
But you can switch to the alternative.
You can switch to the alternative,
But it's not a default. So this
Is there any benefit to bundling, like say bundling with Boxford or something like that?
No, it's community by community. It requires a town meeting article. It is happening. I think Haverhill and or Methuen have done it recently. Swampscott has done it recently. Burlington, there's a growing number of communities. I would say that number is, my guess is well above 50 communities, if not more. Because again, there's not a risk to the homeowner. It provides you, sometimes we're hearing that homeowners get a call from an alternative supplier. They're not quite sure what does it mean. Do I have to make a commitment? Do I have to sign a contract? That uncertainty goes away to a certain extent because we're stepping in and assisting them to locate an alternative supplier, putting them under contract, requiring them to meet certain standards. So it removes some of that uncertainty. I think that's a large reason why most residents don't find alternative suppliers, because when they're on the phone, and my parents just went through this process, it made sense. But at the end of the day, did they feel comfortable after receiving the call to switch to someone? Yeah,
Right,
so
because you don't know, is your service going to change? What else is going to change? It's not
Am I going
just,
to have lights?
yes.
Exactly.
So under this option, I'd be more than happy to have the company come back, speak again to, this company was selected regionally by the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission as part of a regional procurement, same group used by surrounding communities. Have them come in, explain what I just explained to you in detail. The next step, if the board was supportive, is we'd put an article in the next town meeting warrant. If that article was supported, then we would go out to bid, and again, bids are favorable, we proceed. If not, everybody defaults to National Grid. So if it makes sense, I'll put them on the next agenda.
I think so.
Okay.
okay. Next, under communications and announcements, we have an open house for our new fire station on this coming Saturday, November 7th, from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. Everyone is invited and welcome to come and see this really beautiful new facility that we have in town. It's located at 795 Chickering Road, right at the end of the high school playing fields on the corner of Chickering Road and Prescott Street. So hopefully folks can come by and take a look at the new facility. Anything to add to that?
Did a great job.
All right. Okay. And then I will let you speak to the relocation of Town Hall, though.
Well, we have, with the fire station being completed, the next step in the facility master plan, which has already been supported by town meeting, is the reconstruction expansion of this building, Town Hall, into the fire station. So the reconfiguration of certain aspects of the existing building we're in today, and the build-up of the fire station into an expanded Town Hall, so we can, for the first time in, I would argue, town's history, we can have a consolidated Town Hall where services are located in one area. We're due to get the general contractor bids back on December 8th for this building. Occupancy, by the way, of the fire station is November 12th, so open house is the 7th, occupancy is the 12th. General contractor bids on this site December 8th. With that, in order to shorten the construction period from 9 months, or from 13 months to 9 months and reduce costs, we're moving most of the operations out of this building. That would include everybody but the assessing office and veterans. Veterans, we're going to link to the senior center, so we have access for those folks to be there for the people they traditionally service. Clerk, treasurer, collector, town manager's office, procurement, human resources, payroll, accounting are moving out of the building. I'm sure I've missed someone. IT are moving out of this building, and after an invitation for bid, we're entering into a lease with Osgood Landing to move our offices to the space adjacent to the existing community development offices. So we, in essence, will have a unified town hall, just not in the same location that we intended originally. And so almost all of our operations will be on the first floor in Osgood Landing, in adjacent spaces, which is great. It'll allow us to get reacquainted with the other folks who are 3 miles away. It really was access to resources and parking and a little bit some of the IT concerns are the reason why we chose Osgood Landing after an invitation for bid. We believe that the parking is important. Access to the building by residents is particularly important. So we felt that it makes sense. And so we will be moving out of this building. I'm recommending that all departments that meet in this space, including the selectmen, do not hold meetings here beginning December 1st onward. We're likely to have to relocate. This space is not being touched at all, but we'll be using it to move some of our furniture into this space as storage during the construction. And so we're likely to clear this building in December, even though construction won't begin until early January. We have informed all of the major boards, health, zoning, planning, what am I missing? Health, zoning, manning, planning? Conservation, sorry, conservation, and almost everybody else that they need to find alternative space, and they're working aggressively to do that. We will initially have the Board of Selectmen meetings in the new school administration building. They've been kind enough to sort of mark out the calendar for about 10 months in that space. So I wish I had a date for you for when we're actually going to semi-lock the doors here, but not
How long
yet.
is it actually going to take?
We'll be back in this building by the second week in October.
So it's Ray's job to keep the foot on the fire with these guys, right? Like he did with the fire station.
I'm comfortable with Ray's assistance. We will be back in the building by the first or second week in October, yeah.
When the election's coming up, it's going to be
Correct.
crazy.
Our goal is to get back in the building to be fully operational before the presidential election. Yeah, well in advance of that. Yep.
So people, we're not doing anything special for people just coming to drop off their bills other than the box? I know there was a little
Yes,
bit of
great.
talk of having,
So the next steps, because there's a whole bunch of those little items that end up not being little items, right? Postage machines, Dropbox, copy machine, all those things. I've asked Laurie Burzloff to get together with 3 or 4 employees and meet several times over the next couple of months to identify all of those things, including methods of communication, social media, robocalls, and the like, to make sure we're communicating outward to the public. Signs on each of the counters over the next month so residents are aware of it. In addition to identifying those major and minor, which turn out not to be so minor items, that we make sure we're covering it all. I met with the employees today, asked for them to identify all of those things that they think are important that we're aware of as part of the move. We'll begin to formulate all of those steps. So one thought is we leave a box here, but we also put a box at Osgood Landing.
Oh, yeah.
We've talked about having the community services officer probably have to stop here to make sure mail gets to the assessing office. So we have a lot of little things to do, and they're all really important, and we've got a group together focusing on getting those things done. Yep. So it'll be complicated. The good news is about 25% of the staff did a move several years ago, a decade ago, and have some experience with it. For those of us who haven't moved out of the building,
we were in a
know-
warehouse hangar last time.
Yes. This will be slightly better than that. So we're going to try to travel light. That's our goal. Travel light and come back quick.
How long does it take to change things over?
What do you mean?
As far as computers and
Yeah, that actually, because we've
That's
decided to
good.
go to Osgood Landing, our fiber network, which is a pretty elaborate and robust network, connects all municipal buildings and Osgood Landing because of our town offices there. So we have work at the patch panel in the office space we're moving to. That's a day to 2 days worth of work. After that, as our IT director said, we can light up all the phones. So everybody will take their own phone with them and plug it in on the other side, and we're up and operational. Technology will be the same. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
And so Chris is heading that piece up, but we feel that in some ways will be the easiest transition we make.
Chair, is this an appropriate time for us to announce our vote that was an executive session? When we-
We do have,
It is later
we
on?
have that on the agenda.
Consent.
We, we have that as under B under consent
Okay,
items.
sorry, I didn't catch
So
that.
we will get to that.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so other communications and announcements. That's exhausted the list that we had on the agenda. Are there any others? Communications or announcements?
Book sale, sounds like. Book sale. It sounded. I saw
Mr. Tripp,
Ted
you
there, so it
want to
sounds-
inform us all about the book sale?
Sure, did you get it on this?
Did we put one in the back? I'm not sure. I just saw the book sale signs, and I saw you, and I made the linkage.
Okay. So normally we'd wait for public comment, but since we're doing announcements, and we'll let you go ahead and do that.
Ted Tripp, 262 Boston Street. If you haven't seen the signs around town, Friends of Stevens Memorial Library is having a book sale this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Hardcover books are $2, softcover $1. It's a great bargain. It supports the library. You can go to the website for the hours. So come support the library. Thanks.
Thank you. Also, this weekend, I think we have a weekend of service, right? So we may see a lot of young people from Merrimack running around, cleaning up the banks of the lake and doing other projects, working with the senior center. So there's a weekend of service this weekend. I think there's, are they also looking for other volunteers too? I saw something where they were doing a lake shore cleanup and they were asking people to,
Meeting at Stevens Pond.
a meeting at Stevens Pond,
So
yeah.
Lake Shore Cleanup is actually an event that we were having anyway, coordinated with the Public Works Department, Conservation, Harbor Master. And we linked that to Mac Gives Back, the Merrimack project, to link them together to get more resources for that particular event. So there's a number of, that was a community event planned, already in the works, when the Merrimack folks reached out, so we just linked the two to make sure we have more resources.
So you may see a lot of people working around the town this weekend, so that's great. Okay, any other consent items? Oh, I'm not sorry, communications and announcements.
On comments, yes. Just for people who are, have always supported us with our wreaths, it is wreath time again. Price is the same, $65. It's up and down Main Street and around the Common, and you are welcome to put a tag that would identify the donor. I think pretty much everyone in town knows what it is. They've seen it before, but we will be doing that. So some orders have already been coming in, so get your orders in. You can put it attention to me, Rosemary Smedili, 65 Green Street, North Andover. Holiday Decorating Committee is who you make the check out to. And there is something new that will be coming up shortly that kind of adds to this. So be aware of some particulars of people can adopt a string of lights that's just coming up by way of the merchants, the North Andover Women's Club, and Festival Committee. So that will also be being made available very soon. And Veterans Day. But are you going to speak to that, Ted, the Veterans Day?
If you want.
Yeah. What? Maybe you should.
Well, we have an approval item coming up, so we'll ask you to step up at that point. Okay, any other communications announcements? All right, all good stuff. All right, so we'll move on to consent items. First on the list is an acceptance of a donation from the Joseph N. Herman Youth Center, Inc., in the amount of $4,890 for Youth Center scholarships. Mr. Keneally, are you going to come up and speak to that? Frank Keneally is the president of the JNHYC.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Frank Keneally, 56 Surrey Drive, president of the Joseph Herman Youth Center Board. And we want to present $4,890 check to cover scholarships that the Youth Center gave to students that couldn't afford their membership fees. And just kind of a little plug for the Herman Board. We are a separate 501c3 nonprofit board that solely exists to support the services of the Youth Center. So we give out things like scholarships for not only membership, but also programs. We also purchase items for the Youth Center that may not be normal budget items of the town to enhance the experience of the kids at the Youth Center. And most recently, we've been funding some new innovative programs. So if the staff have some kind of innovative program that they want to do, but the budget funding isn't there, they can come to the youth center board, and we would vote on a grant. And two particular programs I just wanted to quickly highlight that have been very successful, that have been also collaborative programs. So there's a new art program called Elevated Thought that we've been working with, and the Herman Board funded that, as well as a youth leadership program, which has been a collaboration of programs in Methuen, Lawrence, Andover, and North Andover. 15 youth from each community were identified through agencies like the Youth Center, the Andover Youth Center, the YMCA, the Lawrence Boys and Girls Club, and have started a youth program called Core 4. All those students are 8th graders. We're going to be working with them all through high school, so it's a multi-year program. They're kind of the best of the best. We started the program off with a weekend at our YMCA camp up on Bear Island in Lake Winnipesaukee. The North Andover kids were outstanding. They did us proud, and I'm sure you're going to be seeing and reading about these kids as they continue this program over the next few years. So I'm happy to be the new chair of the board. So I'll be hopefully coming before this committee over the next few years, bringing more checks in support of service of the youth center. As a citizen with 3 boys that are very active at the youth center, I'm very thankful that our town has such a great youth center, and certainly proud to be a part of the board that supports that. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Great update. So we have a motion to accept the donation. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much to the Joseph Herman Youth Center Board for that generous donation. Okay, next on the list is the ratification of the collective bargaining agreement between the Town of North Andover and the International Association of Firefighters, Local 2035, for a period of July 1st, 2015 through June 30th, 2018. Do I have a motion?
Move that the Board of Selectmen approve the collective bargaining agreement between the town and the International Association of Firefighters, Local 2035, for the period July 1st, 2015 to June 30th, 2018.
Okay, so we have a motion.
I'll second that, as it was previously voted in executive session.
Okay, any further discussion on this? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? You're abstaining? Oh, yes, you weren't there in executive session. So we have three affirmative and one abstain. So that passes. Okay, next on the agenda, appointment of Allison Ann Poole to the Sustainability Committee.
Mr. Chair, move approval of Allison Poole to the Sustainability Committee. Allison Ann Poole to the Sustainability Committee.
I have a motion.
Another great candidate.
Second. Okay, and all those in favor?
Aye.
And since Tracy isn't here, I'll take the lines and say, once again, thank you to all those who volunteer their time to serve on boards in this town. The town would not run so smoothly if we didn't have those folks and those boards to keep things going.
Mr. Chair, for the public to know, this is a high school student at Essex Agricultural Technical High School, and she was really eager to get involved on a town board, so it was pretty neat. It's not often we have teenagers before us.
That's great. Thank you for that update. Okay, next on the list, we have the Patriotic Observance Committee requests permission to conduct a Veterans Day parade and ceremony on Wednesday, November 11th, 2015, starting at 10 a.m. Mr. Tripp, would you like to speak to that?
Sure. Well, next Wednesday is Veterans Day, and as in tradition in North Andover, we have a parade and ceremony. The parade will start around 10 o'clock or shortly thereafter from the CVS parking lot across the street here from Town Hall. And we'd like to invite all the educational and civic groups to march in the parade. All you have to do is show up. You don't have to register or get approval. Just show up in the parking lot about 9:45, and our parade marshal will put you in the parade. And we'll march up Main Street to Patriots Park, which is across from the library, and then it gets there about 10:45 or so. and then we'll have a ceremony which will last approximately 45, 50 minutes. And then the conclusion of the ceremony, the parade will reassemble and march up to the VFW, and we will raise the flag. And then parade participants can stay and have some lunch, and the grown-ups can assemble downstairs for other refreshments.
Okay, do I have a motion?
Motion to move approval?
A motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next, Mr. Tripp, are you getting back up to speak to this one too? I should have had you just stay up there, right? The Patriotic Observance Committee requests permission to add the name of Francis A. Bodnar to the World War II monument in Patriots Park. Also to accept a donation of Atwood Memorial Company for cost of casting and a donation from the American Legion for cost of installation.
Well, the World War II monument, which is across from the library in Patriots Park, has 993 names on it of North Andover men and women who fought in World War II. And there's a star next to 31 of those names, which means they died in service. And that was dedicated in 1949. And you probably don't know it, but originally it was out in front of the town hall here. And it was dedicated with the flagpole out here. At some point in later years, the monument itself was moved, but the flagpole stayed. But anyway, last year, 2014, we were approached by Donna DiStefano, who is the daughter of Francis X. Bodenrader. And she asked that his name be added to the monument. She said that he was a resident of North Andover and he died in service. It turns out he was a lieutenant. He was on a B-24 that was flying from California to Hawaii. It was lost at sea. They never found any trace of the plane or the crew. So basically it was missing at sea in 1945. We did some research on it. It turns out that his name is listed on the Andover World War II monument. And for reasons that aren't totally clear, his parents lived, at least for some time while he was growing up, in Andover. But our records also show that his parents lived in North Andover. So I don't know if they lived sometime here and then sometime in Andover. But we did find that at the time that he joined the service, he was living in North Andover, and at the time of his death, he was living on Sutton Street, as you see in the paperwork that I gave you. So we thought it was totally suitable to add his name to the monument. Now, this will be the first name that's been added to the monument since 1949. So this is a little bit unusual. We've never been faced with this before. So we did some research over the summer. We talked to 3 different monument companies on how to approach this, where it should be done. So we ended up with Atwood Memorial Company, which is just across the town line in Haverhill, and they have offered to do this or to do the casting for free. But they have a company that they work with that actually affixes the casting to the monument, that they would have to pay to do that. And that charge would be the $125 to $150 I list. Now, Joe Smith and the American Legion have offered to pay that amount. So the cost of the town, total cost of the town would be $0 to add the name to the monument. And I think I've also attached a picture of where it would be placed on the monument in your packet. So you can see there's room for maybe 3 or 4 names at the end of the 933 listed. So it's almost like when they designed how they were putting the names on the monument, they did leave some space at the end in case somebody had to be added at a later point. So what we're asking the town or the Board of Selectmen to do tonight is to okay it so we can go ahead and add the name at the family's request.
It sounds like a totally appropriate thing to do.
Thank you.
A lot of work to go into researching that.
So moved to Jim.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, is Columbia Gas has request permission to excavate 3 sites, 2nd Street, Commonwealth Ave, and East Water Street.
Mr. Chairman, as recommended in the past, when we have service installation or emergency repairs, I traditionally signed the street opening and the gas permit in cases where the service is more than just a routine install of a new customer service and emergency, bring those to the board for approval.
And all this work is to be done obviously before the freeze.
Yes.
Is there
Okay.
anyone here to speak to it? Move approval?
All right, we have a motion. We have a second. Do we move them separately, or we'll just take them all as one?
You can
right?
take them as one if you
Take them all as one?
Yeah.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that is all set. Let's see. Festival Committee and North Andover Police Association request permission to conduct the annual Santa Parade on Saturday, November 28th, 2015, starting at noon. Anybody here to speak to that? Okay, no one here to speak to that. It's the annual Christmas parade. It promises to be even bigger and better this year. So I think every year, over the last 3 or 4, 5, 6 years, we've been getting much better attendance and much better participation in the parade, and this one is just going to be all that much better this year. So, any motion on this?
Move approval, and thank you to the committee. It's a great time. It's fun.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I think the only thing I read in one of the letters from the festival committee was they wanted to restrict the tossing of candy.
It's a bylaw.
Doesn't work.
Okay,
There's a
don't,
bylaw
I know,
about that.
and they also want to restrict anyone under the age of 15 from hanging off of unrestrained, off of any kind of a float or anything. I'm not quite sure how we can enforce that, but,
Is that hanging off a float? Oh, right.
oh, you can hang on anything you want.
I think the 15-year age threshold is fine with you.
So.
There's so much that could be said, but we're just leave it.
Let's let it go. So I'm not quite sure how to handle that, but I think.
I would just approve the request.
Okay, so we'll approve the request as written by Lieutenant Folds with the provisions therein. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We have a request from the North Andover Fire Department to surplus an ambulance that is no longer serviceable,
Correct. I support that recommendation.
supported by the town manager. Do I have a motion?
Move approval to surplus the 2008 Ford ambulance.
We have a motion and a second. I think the last one we surplus was actually used by the emergency
Emergency management.
Yeah.
emergency
Yeah,
man-
This
so-
one is, condition of this one is far worse than even the older one that emergency management uses.
Okay, so this one has no.
This one
no
has,
value, no
there's
use.
nothing left in this one.
Okay. So, all those in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Okay, the next item is a vote on the process for appointment of police chief and fire chief. Out of respect for the chair, who would prefer to be here for this discussion, I'm going to recommend that we table this item until our next meeting.
Do you want a motion for that?
You don't need a motion.
Will any motion? Okay, so we'll table that until our November 16th meeting. The next under consent items is the formation of an opioid abuse task force. Selectman DeColigiero has been crafting this, and would you like to speak to this? And
So this was born out of a discussion that we as a board had at our annual strategic planning meeting. we had discussed ways that we as a community could be responding to this issue and how we think it's impacting North Andover. And there wasn't a tremendous amount of data that we had immediately at our disposal. We talked about not fully understanding the scope of the problem, not fully understanding the best ways to respond, and so it seems like it's a small step and we're starting at the ground floor, but I felt after our conversation the best step isn't actually, I should say, committing resources immediately, but rather having us as a board and the community fully understand the scope and how this issue has impacted our town. So I took very seriously recommendations. Rosemary, for instance, you talked about how important it would be to reach out to other communities. I completely agree.
Thank you for that.
Selectman Watson mentioned prevention and also the importance of making sure the state was advocating for increasing the number of beds. And so I found myself interrupting a football game for 90 minutes at Selectman Stewart's house and throwing this letter together. And I was really very fortunate to have Tom Trowbridge, who chairs our Board of Health, review it. I know that Frank is here tonight, Frank McMillan, Dr. McMillan from the board, having Stan Limpert look this over from the school committee, because I wanted us as a board, and I wanted other boards in town that may be impacted by this, to have all the information they possibly could that explains the scope of this problem in our community. And so I felt that the best bet would be to form a task force. This wasn't something I envisioned as being a multi-year organization, but rather a group that would have the express purpose of gathering information, synthesizing it, and presenting it to our board so that we, as a board, again, have a full understanding, as well as other communities, other policymaking boards in our community, excuse me. And so this was my proposal to the board, that we consider forming this task force and taking representatives from the police department, fire department, youth and rec services, our school department, as well as members of the school committee, Board of Health, and of course us, to participate and gather this data and in turn present information to this board. I think that it would be important equally that this group set benchmarks, identify issues for me. I mean, what I wanted to have them identify is demographics, the type of people that are being impacted by this. What is the age group? Where are they coming from in town? Are they individuals who are repeatedly overdosing? How is our public safety handling this? What is the cost to our public safety? Are these people that are trying to get help but not able to get help? And what we as a community have been doing before they ever fall into addiction when it comes to prevention. And so I am not at all an expert on what our schools are doing, but I'll say just even in the past month of just picking their brain. At one point I sat with all of our school nurses about 2 weeks ago, as well as Brian Gross, who chairs our school committee, and just some of the programs they touched upon, I know I wasn't aware of. I don't think most of our community is aware of, and I think it would be helpful for us to know what those programs are so we can better identify gaps and perhaps formulate a response. I also know that this isn't just about us, it's about how our state representatives and state senators respond, and so I definitely wanted to include, and they were gracious enough to be included in the drafting of this, both of our state representatives, Representative Lyons and Representative DeZoglio, because of course this information is helpful for them. And I think it will give us the tools to decide what type of next step we want to take, whether it's working with other communities and actually providing resources in the form of staff, or whether it's simply tweaking certain programming we have, whether it's us officially as a board advocating to our state legislators to pursue different initiatives. We're fortunate there are a lot of different resources in our community already and beyond that I think have a lot of the data we'd be looking for. The Merrimack Valley Substance Abuse and Prevention Project is one that has played, I think, a crucial role in helping direct Methuen, for instance, in the direction they've moved in. But that is a regional organization that's been collecting data on how other communities are responding. Another group is, we are a member of a collaborative right now where through, I think it's a $100,000 grant through the Methuen-Lawrence Community Partnership, we've had members of our youth center staff and police department staff working with other communities to also collect data. So I don't feel like this is a heavy lift, but in my opinion, it would be helpful, I think, to the mission of this group to know that we as a board want this information and are eager to hear their feedback and try to respond if we feel that it's an appropriate action for our board to take.
So beyond information gathering and reporting back, you envision this group making recommendations or at least recommending next steps? Or
when we met, a great point was made. about looking at how other communities are responding to this, and
I was even saying, even nationwide, anybody who seems to be having some success, let's see what they're doing and see if we can work it into our programs. And hopefully someday someone will be turning to our program and saying, look what they're doing. And it's just not reinvent the wheel. If we see somebody doing, making some headway. A lot of it, and I'm so glad that you included the Board of Health, a lot of the problem starts with the doctors who are prescribing painkillers for people who are in pain. But unfortunately, they get hooked really quick. So that's a lot of, but anyways, I think it's great. I really appreciate that you incorporated that we would try to find some success stories or things that don't go well. So let's not try that. That didn't work.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think it's great. I really do. Thank you for taking this on.
I think we have a neighboring town, Gloucester, right, has been piloting a program that's been somewhat successful in being used by other communities too. Right?
Gloucester, Methuen, Andover. I mean, Andover and Methuen have both responded a little bit differently. Methuen has committed resources to 2 social workers that are working part-time through their police department. Andover has responded. I don't know where they are in the process, but their Board of Selectmen voted to approve funding or to move funding to support 2 different community staff positions. Two seemingly similar approaches, but I think that the goal of each town is a little bit different with the positions they're funding. Either way, it's uncharted territory, and I'm eager to see how those programs work in those communities. I know that, in speaking with our colleagues on their Board of Selectmen in Andover and speaking with city councilors and the mayor in Methuen as well as their police chief, both communities would be willing to work with us if we saw that there was a way we could team up with one or both of them. I don't know. I know that we've at least started just to have those conversations about whether they'd be open to such a thing. I don't know where we are in the process. I think there's a meeting on Friday. Right.
Mr. Chair, there's some questions in the back of the room.
Oh, sure. Would you, I think under this, are you willing to accept?
So I posted this on Facebook. I'm shocked by the feedback, actually, and about how great it was to get feedback, and so
That's where I saw it.
I appreciate it.
Debbie and I both.
Could you just say your name?
Yeah. I'm Libby Strauss, and I live at Mill Pond in North Andover. I have a very personal interest in this whole issue and want to be a part of the task force. My daughter passed away last December from a heroin overdose here in North Andover. She was 21, almost 22. I only found out she was a heroin addict like a few weeks before. So I've kind of had to work backwards, teaching myself about addiction. What's involved. I spent a lot of time on the other side of the fence, if you will, kind of thinking, oh yeah, well, they made this choice and so on, and I've come to understand it's really a disease. I also been involved in a few groups, GRASP, which stands for Grief Recovery After Substance Passing. I go to a group in Salem, Mass, and one in Lowell. It's made up primarily of parents who have lost their children. So you were asking about demographics. It's usually 18 to maybe 27, 28. That's where there's a huge amount. And then we see maybe early 30s and then some older folks. That seems to be where it is. I would like to see the focus. I understand your need to gather data, but I would like to make a priority to have an educational focus first, because the best thing you can do is stop this in their tracks. Stop a kid in high school from ever thinking about trying it. It's, you try it once and maybe you get away with it, but it's just a drug that's so incredibly addictive. And what's out there now is, it's sometimes cut with fentanyl or it's just extra strong. I mean, the cartels in Mexico know what they're doing. This isn't like the heroin from many years ago. It's very potent stuff and very highly addictive, and they're making tons of money off of us.
Do you think that would you be willing to consider in your recommendation that they do both at the same time? Task force could be
Oh, yeah,
different,
yeah, I do.
some on
Absolutely,
education, some
yeah.
on programs that
No, I don't.
seem to have succeeded.
I'm not trying to dismiss the importance of understanding the demographics and so on, but I probably have more personal anecdotal experience and stories.
And forgive me for not saying at the beginning, we're very sorry for your
Yeah.
loss
Oh, thank
and your
you.
courage to come here.
It's
in
been
front
a
of-
long journey. As far as speaking, I did speak out this past February at Salvatore's when Dan Rosenberg
Right, when he was-
had a
yeah.
meeting. Yeah, I was like the last speaker, and my daughter struggled with bipolar depression, mental illness. So I was speaking out needs for mental illness in the communities as well as addiction. I also participated in the Jim Wahlberg movie, If Only. My daughter's photo is shown at the end of the film. I don't know how many of you have heard of it or seen it. You can Google it. It's If, Only. It is on YouTube. I've watched what other communities have been doing, Andover. I've had, the occasion to meet a few key people that are excellent speakers. One's a physician, Dr. Ruth Potee. She's excellent. She's out in Greenfield, but she does come east to speak in communities. Melissa, I always forget her name, Wexner, I think it is. She's an excellent speaker, too. But I think you probably need to have something for the school children, or the high school students, and then you'd want to do something for the parents. But I know Andover I didn't go to that one, but I've been to other screenings of the film, and from what I heard, it was a very successful. Melissa was there, and she said those kids they were paying attention. You could hear a pin drop. So, and I don't know how many of you saw the program on 60 Minutes
I
Sunday.
did.
Yeah,
It shows
it's just...
it cuts across all demographics.
Well, I go to these meetings, and we're all white, and it's middle and upper middle class. Melissa's daughter, she's from Carlisle. Her daughter was a junior at Boston College. It's not, we have to get rid of the stereotype that it's just a bunch of other kids. My daughter had completed 1 year of college, and she was a bright, talented young woman, and, she made some bad choices. And if I'd known better what was going on, I probably could have maybe helped her get into treatment, which is a whole nother topic, but I guess and I know Debbie said that there's some meetings going on with the police station now. Yeah, I'll let you do that, but anyway, I would very much like to be a part of the committee.
I appreciate you coming out, Ms. Strauss, and sharing that story.
Hello. Debbie Savoya, Howard Street, 22. You talk about reinventing the wheel. That's kind of what you'll be doing here, because there's the Merrimack Valley Prevention Substance Abuse Project and a program, and they already have the ball rolling on this, and it's not just for Methuen, but it's for the whole Merrimack Valley area. Andover is joining in with them, and it would be wonderful if North Andover could join in with them. There are a lot of parents from this town that are already part of that organization. They got some committees going to be starting now. They're just starting them. And I know the chief of police here has also made some calls and has already been starting, I think about a week or two ago, to get the ball rolling in North Andover. So I don't know if it's lack of communication, but things have been going on.
So Betsy Cody, I know you work with her on that. This actually, I made sure that when we wrote this and when we were talking about this, that I worked hand in hand with Betsy, because I know the impact that it had with her. Phil Leahy, who runs that organization, and I have spoken about it. I know that I think he said either one or two subcommittees.
Well, I haven't yet, but... Yeah.
Well, they've grown to the point, this organization, where they're tackling quite a bit. In fact, this is the organization that inspired the legislation to be filed with the state that female addicts will no longer be sent to prison instead of going to a rehab facility. Right now, that's actually a policy, and so that's an example of something this group has produced. This may sound odd, but I feel like we truly are starting. That project has been around for 3 years. they've had the opportunity, a tremendous opportunity to educate that. I mean, it is a regional group, but to educate Methuen, to educate their police chief. They've educated their policymakers there on what the situation is like in Methuen. And they do have people outside of Methuen in there, but they've educated the individuals there. And so their police chief, their political leaders' response was to put two part-time social workers in place.
Which are not just for Methuen, that if we needed them here, any community would be able to use them.
But it's through their municipal budget. And so I didn't know, I mean, we can certainly work with them. Again, that's who, I believe there's at least 3 people from North Andover meeting with Mayor, or at least Robin Stein, the mayor's chief of staff, on Friday, and several other individuals to talk about potentially working with them. That being said, before I had suggested committing resources, and I was perhaps a little bit very excited to tackle this, I guess, I felt that it was important to educate our policymakers before going and committing resources. And so I certainly would love.
I mean, I think our
jump right in
police
with
is
both
also,
people.
I mean, they're on board. I mean, they're doing the Narcan. They've all been trained for Narcan. So this is nothing new. They've been saving lives. We've lost lives in North Andover. I mean, they're the first ones on the scene. So, it's nothing new. I guess for me, I don't want to see you wasting time, just having groups and sitting and talking. I mean, this is an epidemic. We're losing kids in an unbelievable rate. And I think the main thing that needs to be done is we need to educate. We need to start educating our kids. And I would say in middle school as opposed to high school, we need to start educating them because these kids are doing it at a young age. These kids are being put on medication at a young age for whatever, for athletic injuries or whatever. It's a scary thing, and I just hate to see time wasted. Like, all these other communities are already doing stuff, and here we are in November, and we haven't done anything yet. So, I mean, I guess that's my point, is I just don't want to see time wasted, basically, and with these other organizations, the Merrimack is already there, and to join in, and to get involved with them, and to send people over. I mean,
if I could talk just a bit to that, because so and I am meeting with the mayor's chief of staff and Methuen police chief, our police chief, and some other staff to talk about what they do. I think one of the struggles, and it's not critical, and I hope it isn't taken in a critical fashion, is what is the appropriate response. So, because quite frankly, I can speak for myself, I'm just not knowledgeable enough to know what the appropriate response is. So we see and we read and we hear about staff members being added, and we don't know if that's the right, with no criticism to another community, is that the right response? So you've spoken about the need for education as an example, and that's a component of the job descriptions that are happening in Andover and Methuen, but it's not. When I see positions, not critical to the other towns, and I hope this is all taken in context, when I see other communities adding them to the police department, it has a tendency to at least have the optics of not being about middle school education. It has the optics to being a public safety response. So part of what Phil and the board is trying to do is we could find a way to fund $40,000, $30,000, $50,000, but we also want to make sure that the dollars are going in the appropriate location to yield some result. And that's what I think you're getting to with the task force is it's evident there's an epidemic. I don't think the task force is going to spend a whole bunch of time determining whether there's an epidemic or whether that's affecting North Andover. We certainly know that. Police department communicates with me, as the fire department does, regularly about their responses. I know what the data looks like. There's clearly an issue. The question is, how does North Andover respond? And the challenge has always been appropriately. But what's appropriate? Is the 40, I'm using just dollars, right? Does a staff member mean an additional staff member in the school department? Is it retooling the health department so that the focus is different than what it was, looking at Dr. McMillan, 30 years ago when it was more about restaurant inspections, but today should be about public health response? Is it to the police department? I think what the board wants to make sure we do is that the response is not reactive and inappropriate, but goes directly to where it could yield the best result. And I think that's ultimately the goal, and at least as I've understood the task force, where is that? Because to this point, the resources that have been added have been pretty consistently toward adding a staff to the police departments. But as you've identified, the police department are already responding today, and and administering Narcan. Our fire department is administering Narcan 10 times more often than the police department. It's happening a lot. So I think it's more trying to figure out where those resources should be applied to try to impact an epidemic as aggressively as we can. Can't solve the problem, but how can we apply the resources in the right place? So sounds to me like you folks would say education, right? Right.
But not just educating the kids, but parents on how to look
Correct,
for
yeah.
these, I mean, like,
And the
parents
medical
are,
community
To
as
be
well.
aware, right?
The pharmaceutical and medical community need to be monitoring too, who seems to be getting the prescriptions refilled, or it's not just at us, it's at other levels, but I think, again, that there's such desire for everyone to get involved that there's different components. You want a great educational program in the schools. You want to be working with the medical community. You want to be looking at rehab. There's no one thing. So let's see what works. And it seems as though that what you're gearing towards is, and then get everybody working in concert to attack the problem. I mean, you don't want to be working on, I'm just saying this as an example, maybe our schools are working on the educational portion of it. So that's great. Fine-tune that, but let's fine-tune working with the medical community, and let's fine-tune work with the police. But there's just not one solution to this. This is a multifaceted problem. And working with families. Sometimes there's just not the support at home, that the families are dysfunctional, but we've got some young person here who could lose their life because we've got to help it's so complex. But I think it's great. This task force is going to hopefully pull all these pieces together and fight this with everything we can fight it with. And I do agree with Andrew that if we're going to spend the resources, we don't want to be spending it in something that's already seems to be working. We need to use our monies wisely to protect these kids and families. I mean, it's just a horrible thing that unfortunately you have had to experience, and other people as well. But I do have to say, our police have been pretty proactive. We've saved quite a few lives with the Narcan. It just isn't always publicized. They've really.
If I could just.
In the educational piece initially, doing what Andover did and other communities, showing film and having other resources there, does not have to be expensive. Many of these people donate their time.
Right, exactly.
You're not paying them a fee. Jim Wahlberg does not charge to show his film.
Mr. So that sounds like a perfect example of what the project is working on regionally. And I got a lot of feedback, private messages, really, and so I tried to respond to as many as I could today, and I was sending links to Phil Leahy and directing these people to Phil Leahy and Phil Leahy's organization, because how these people wanted to get involved is very much in that way, where it's not you don't need this board of selectmen, you don't need our town hall to formalize policy to get education into North Andover. And he's really eager to get into North Andover. They've teamed up with Andover. I don't want to say unfortunately, but it's not as we're not looking to form a group that rivals them or takes away what they're doing. I view this as complementary, where we're collecting the data which inspires more people to get involved and push some of their programs.
So a question for you? Would it be
Absolutely.
the expectation of the task force that they would identify existing resources and sort of check those off as existing resources? So what comes back to the board and to myself as a person who has to construct budgets and deal with staff would identify those areas of need rather than, because I think what's helpful in the conversation is if there's an existing resource, we don't need to replicate that.
Exactly.
And so it would be essential to understand where there are services that we may not be linking to, but we don't need to create again, right?
and that's why sit down, have the lady come by and sit down with him. And, I mean, he's phenomenal, and to have him sit down and.
He will be the first person to sit in on this task force and provide us.
Well, I don't know if he wants to sit on the task
No,
force.
no. To come and provide information. Yes.
And what I wanted to say was, although this seems like it's the first step, I mean, it's really not, because Selectman DeColigiero and others have been working on it. He's already been meeting with department heads and obviously very knowledgeable people in the community. So this really will hit the ground running. I don't think there'll be time wasted here. I think there's a lot of passion, obviously, and a lot of concern around this. I think it's really something that will hit the ground running. I don't think there'll be a lot of
Listen,
time
the only way-
wasted in committee.
And I neglected to say, I said the police, but also our fire department too have,
Oh, yeah, they're phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
Yeah,
both
the only way to
departments
get
are on.
anything accomplished, and I've always said it for years, and whatever I do, is like communication. If people don't communicate, nothing gets solved. When people start communicating and working together, like, things happen. It's incredible. I think Phil's a perfect example of that. He's been dealing with it for a long time, and Governor Baker, I think he just signed it with money towards to go for education, and so.
Can I add to that in addition to communication, because it's a little bit of a bone to pick for me? Drug addiction, like few other things, but certainly others, is a borderless issue, right? So Methuen, Andover, Haverhill, Lawrence, wherever we want to draw this line, we need communication, and we need to drop the parochialism as it relates to the response. So if it's happening somewhere and it's being performed well, we don't need to recreate it. We can just participate with it. And it's not really to you, this comment, but generally speaking, I find sometimes we get caught up in that, and so we say we need our program, right? But I can tell you the data shows that probably 40% of our response to overdose are non-residents. And I'm sure there's similar data as we cross the border. So some of our folks who suffer overdose will be in a neighboring community. So this is a greater than regional problem, and our response needs to be greater than regional. If someone's doing something well, we tap onto it, and if there's a gap somewhere that we can fill, that someone else can tap onto, we do that as well.
Gap is, that was my buzzword when I was doing this with many people. I don't know, this is like the 18th version, but at one point I think gap was in every third line, because it was recognizing where the gaps exist and where we as a community can play a role in filling some of them. I don't anticipate that we'd be able to fill all of them as a municipality with finite resources, but
Well, I think the huge thing is that North Andover has a problem just like everybody else, and to get that out and parents to realize that, it's you can have speakers coming to the high school auditorium, but if parents don't show up, and I always say I've gone to many things, and the only event I had ever gone to that the auditorium was full was when the Columbine. I think it was the kid that was involved, whatever, the Columbine people came and spoke out. They had spoken to the kids in the day, and then those kids went home. I don't know what it was about that event, but they went home, and for the parent meeting that night, that auditorium was packed. And I have to say that was the only event that I've gone to, and I've gone to many of them, that it was that. And, it was incredible. And I think for people to think in North Andover, that I live in North Andover, whatever, and you can say that, we've had, the overdoses, but they don't come from North Andover, and that's all well and fine, but there is still a problem in North Andover. No, I know, and I'm not saying that toward you. I'm just trying to make, the general, that it is happening here, and people can sit back and say, like drinking or whatever, it's happening, and people need to be aware of it, and people need to show up. And like I said, if parents, you can make parents to be aware and to see symptoms, to nip it in the bud, that's...
Instead of an invitation, it should almost be part of the parent-teacher conferences or...
PTO meet, yeah, I'm not a PTO.
But when parents generally all come for parent-teacher conference, they should maybe have a session at the beginning just on this and at the middle school. But again, you're right. Sometimes it's the parents who don't need to go are the ones that go. And unfortunately, again, how do you reach out to maybe some of the kids where there's just not the supervision at home, or the parents are overwhelmed, or illness? You just don't know. But
thank you.
Thanks. I'd like to give anybody else. Dr. McMillan, would you like to come up?
I'll be brief. Frank McMillan, 143 Carterfield Road, on the Board of Health, medical doctor. The Health Board is entirely supportive of this, and whatever you ask us to do, we'll be very supportive and we'll help you. The way I see a task force is really advisory. There's a lot of good data out there. There are things that are being done by the governor. There have been things by the medical societies. There have been things that have been done by groups of people in the addiction community. We want to be here to help, to advise you, to help you distill what the best practices are, and we're here for you, and just let us know what we can do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Constable. Thank you for coming in. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. Anybody else that want to speak on this while we have an open mic going? Okay, well, thank you all for coming in tonight and sharing with us. So I think at this point, we're ready for a motion.
Move approval.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. In this motion, do we want to establish the makeup of the membership and the actual charge of the organization or the group? Are you ready to do that at this point?
About composition, I mean, I realized after reading, in fact, I was with Dr. Trowbridge's wife because she was able to read it and offered edits, but she pointed out, and I agree with her that, you know, I had put in language in there that the board appoint at least one parent of a current or former addict. I don't know that if that's too restrictive. I mean, for me, if there's anybody that wants to participate and help collect data or provide input for data we should be looking for, I am entirely open to those individuals coming forward and participating.
So are you saying you don't want to lock down the membership numbers, or you want to
At least,
leave that fluid?
least up through the board. I mean, I would like to formalize from, you know, including a designee of the police department, fire department, youth and rec services, school department designees, and the school committee and board of health designees. But I suppose I wouldn't want to limit any parent that wants to come and help collect information for us. Many hands make light work.
Okay.
Except in government. Right, Andrew?
So, I mean, I'm okay with that. Do we want to put that in the form of the motion, just as the membership, makeup of the membership? Or do we want to just leave that open-ended?
It would, I don't know that I see that in here, or it would also be great, I mean, we have a lot of really talented and educated people in this town. If there's already somebody who lives in town who already works with this in the form of counseling, or a medical doctor who treats people with addiction problems, that would be fantastic.
Yeah.
You don't want to fill up the thing when we could have someone who's can really offer some great direction and understanding too. So I don't know. I think, can we leave it somewhat open?
Open-ended.
Do you object to that, Andrew?
I only object from an administrative perspective of
Oh,
trying to
100
put,
people, yeah.
we're going to try to coordinate a group of people so that we can get them moving in a certain direction. It would be helpful to understand, at least loosely, the four corners of the group we're trying to assemble.
Well, how about this? How about that people submit their interest in joining the committee, and then some members of the committee say, you know, we often do this for putting boards together, like for the Board of Health, we want a doctor, we want a dentist, we want someone who does septic, we try an attorney. I'm wondering if you just, people can submit applications and then a group will pick through them, or?
Again, I don't know who's picking them. So I think a suggestion would be, if you had identified specific, what I would identify as sort of ex officio members, a member of the Board of Health, keep scripted that way, and then just identify a number of residents.
I think that's great.
Just a number.
So
And
what you're
then
saying-
folks will submit interest around that number.
Yeah.
Committee will meet, or we'll find some process through maybe this appointment
Yeah.
subcommittee to select the balance.
So when you're saying ex officio, you're saying like a member from the Board of Health, a member from the police department, a member from the fire department, that kind. I think that's a great idea.
So what you've identified, you know, youth, school committee, that group, and then just sort of not add to the back, but then identify 3 residents as determined.
Like the appointments. I mean, the
Yeah,
appointment
that's all.
subcommittee, so that way they don't have to, I mean, you and I can just talk about
Correct.
it via email.
Okay.
Or meet with them for coffee and not have to wait until the next meeting.
And if anybody's here who's interested, you just have to shoot us an email, so we can, but we'll put that out on the town's website as well. So I would just leave 3 positions as to be selected.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's good.
How's that?
I think that's good.
To be filled by the
That's
appointment
fine
subcommittee.
for the immediate board, but of course, you'll always be open to other folks coming in and providing
Absolutely.
input. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's an ad hoc board, so So it doesn't need the rigidity that you would have with an elected board or,
an appointed board.
if someone shows up, they come to 4 meetings, you want to include them, you're not bound by the same, there's not terms to the appointment, it's just an ad hoc board. Not just, I don't mean to minimize this role,
No,
but
but
it gives you the flexibility of not having to worry about that.
I'm glad you made that clear, actually.
So the motion would be the representatives identified in Selectman DiColigiro's memo and 3 other residents to be determined.
So
So move, so you'll amend your
I'll
motion
take
for
that
that.
as a friendly amendment.
Second, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, well,
Thank you. Thank you to
Good luck.
everyone for coming
Yeah,
out.
thank
I
you for
appreciate
coming
that.
in.
It's important.
okay. Next, we're going to go slightly out of order. We are going to take a public hearing next. We're going to go to the public hearing for Comcast, the request to install underground broadband conduit at 120 Willow Street, at utility pole 160. So we need a motion to go into a public meeting.
Here.
Public hearing, sorry.
Motion on a public hearing?
Motion to public hearing, I'm sorry.
Great.
Reading, yeah.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. All right, so we're now in a public hearing. Are you sure you can speak to this?
So I didn't
I know.
didn't see you until earlier, so I apologize.
That's okay. I'm Ed Thompson. I'm project coordinator for Comcast for the town and the area. And we do propose to install a new conduit across from 120 Willow Street, a utility pole onto the grounds of 120 Willow Street. And that's it. We already went through the conservation process. We got approval for that a couple of weeks ago.
And when will this be installed?
Hopefully within 2 weeks. Yeah,
2 weeks.
before it gets too cold, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so,
You need to close the hearing first.
okay, motion to close the hearing?
Motion to close the hearing.
All in favor? Excuse me, the hearing is now closed. Move approval. Do we have a second? Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Will Joyce notify us on this, or is that how that goes?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Andrew's making motions on behalf of Tracy tonight.
Kind of moved you along a little bit. There was a little bit of hang
It's all right, it's all right.
Just trying to grease the skids a little bit.
It's fine.
Okay, so we can jump back to licensing commission. We have,
Yes. See, I didn't do that one.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're now in licensing. We have a request before us for a change of manager for the Richdale, actually, there's 2, right? It's a change of manager and a DBH, well, we don't need to do that, but change of manager at Richdale, or what I would call Arthur's Corner, down on 4 Main Street. I see that all the paperwork has been submitted. The police were in agreement and had no issues with that, and the fees have all been paid. I don't see anybody here to speak to this. This protocol doesn't really require us to do that, right? We've had change of management in the past where we haven't had folks in to speak to it.
If there was something wrong with ABCC, would stop us.
And although it was a different setting, we have met the person who would be the new manager.
Right, she was in, is the wife of the current owner, I believe.
Yes, the current.
Move approval.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? All those in favor? All right, so the change of manager.
Motion
Okay.
to move out of licensing?
Motion,
Motion to move out of licensing.
Second.
We're off
All those
a
in
tick
favor?
tonight a little bit, that's all. I'm just trying to move
Maybe
things.
it's me, I'm not sure. I guess I should have.
I'm a little slow tonight.
Didn't I see you guys at
I wanted
noon?
to see if there were any other licensing issues. I
Sorry.
didn't flip to the second page yet.
I'm on top of things tonight.
Sorry.
All right, so, seeing we have
whatever role you'd like.
no old business, no new business, we have public comment tonight?
Come on, Stan.
I see
He's in the second month of his period,
Trimester.
probation period.
second trimester was.
He must complete the month of November in silence.
Okay, so no public comment, which surprises me.
Hey, that doesn't work around town hall, Stan, you know what I mean?
Okay, ask the manager.
I would just add, if I can ask myself, the question is the status of the Osgood solar application. The planning board approved with conditions. Decision will take about 3 weeks to write of the Osgood Solar project. The town has entered into a host customer agreement in Osgood Solar. The next steps with Osgood Solar would be to begin the negotiation of a pilot agreement, net metering credit agreement that's sometime off, and we'll come back to the board for ultimate approval when we get to that point.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, our next meeting will be Monday, November 16th, 2015, 7 o'clock, right here in Town Hall, which could be our last meeting in
The
town.
30th, November 30th, you'll be here.
November 30th will be here,
That'll be
so.
the tax classification hearing.
Oh, wonderful.
favorite.
Oh, wonderful.
Good way to end
We're going
things.
to start meeting at the school building after?
That will be in the month of December, and I will foreshadow, you're currently scheduled at the 7th. The 2 meetings you're scheduled for, one of them is the 21st of December. We may come back and recommend the 7th and the 15th to move you a little bit further away from the Christmas holiday.
Will you meet us with that
That
couple
is
of bucks and then just go listen to
Yes.
prices?
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not gonna say that.
So, I will be out of town next week, so I won't be able to participate in our Veterans Day ceremony. So I'd like to wish all the veterans and thank all the veterans and the current members of our military and thank them all for their service. Okay. Motion to adjourn?
Yeah, motion adjourned.
Yeah.
A second? All those in favor? Aye.